Welcome to this Stripe crash course where we are going to be taking a look at how we can integrate payments and subscriptions into a real Next.js application from scratch. Now, if you've ever tried to implement Stripe in a project before, you're going to know that there's a lot that goes on under the hood. So things like webhooks, subscription lifecycle events, feature gating, billing portals, and that's exactly what we are going to cover in this video. So here's what we are building. We have this SaaS application, so let's come over to the pricing page, and we have two plans. We have a free plan and a pro plan. Free users can go on to access the basic dashboard that we have over here, but certain features are going to be locked behind the paywall. So to unlock those, they would need to upgrade to a pro plan. So concretely, here's what we are going to be implementing together. First, we have this Stripe checkout flow. So when a user clicks on upgrade over here, we are going to create a Stripe checkout session and redirect them to Stripe hosted payment page where they can enter their card details, pay, and then they get redirected back to application. So I'm going to do this quickly. And once I hit on start trial, I'm going to be redirected back to the application. And this time around, I have upgraded my plan. And you can see we also implemented a 7-day free trial period over here. And once you come back to dashboard, as a user, as a pro user, I can now have access to more features in the application. We also are going to take a look at webhooks. Webhooks is one of the big parts of Stripe payment or any payment gateway. They are how the server goes to know that the payment actually has happened. So we're going to handle 4 events: a checkout completed event, a subscription updated, a subscription deleted, and also a payment failed event. And the results of these events, we are going to write to our database. Third, we have a billing portal. So over here in the application, if we come over to the billing page, we have this billing portal over here. So open billing portal. Instead of building our own cancel and update card UI, we're going to let Stripe handle that with their hosted billing portal page. We're going to have just one server action with one redirect, and our users can go on to manage their entire subscription themselves without the need of writing extra code. And fourth, as we have seen, we also have feature gating. So once we know a user's subscription status from our database, we are going to lock or unlock features based on their plan. We are going to do this cleanly at the server component level. So on the client side, there's not going to be any client flicker or any workarounds that we are going to be implementing. And that's what we are going to be building today. For the stack, we are definitely making use of Next.js, TypeScript, Tailwind CSS, shadcn UI, and we also make use of Drizzle ORM and the Neon Postgres database for the database. For authentication, we make use of Auth.js. So we also have a boilerplate code over here, which we are going to get started with, so we do not have to implement everything from the ground up. So you want to come over here. The link to this GitHub is going to be in the description. And once you hit here, you're going to have access to clone this project. Once you get it cloned, do not forget to rename the .env.example to just .env, and we can get started from there. So this is me, Bright here. I just got into freelancing and I've been helping clients build out their projects, and I have 5-star ratings here. So if you have a project in mind, something you would like me to work on for you, the link to my Upwork is going to be in the description below. So do well to contact me or send me an email. Let's discuss about your project. So without any further ado, let's get started with the Stripe integration. Okay guys, before we continue, I want us to understand the project that we have over here. Do not forget that you need to run npm install, which is going to install the dependencies for this package. We are making use of npm as the package manager. And once you have npm installed, also create this .env file. And then I'm going to show you how you can get the credentials here. The .env.example, you see we need the database URL. We also need the authentication secret. We need the next auth URL as well as the next public application URL. Because we are making use of next auth and we are making use of Drizzle ORM as the ORM of choice here, it doesn't mean if you are using something like Prisma ORM, the idea is the same, and you will definitely be able to follow along in this tutorial. Okay, so let's take a look at the .env file itself. We have the database URL. We're making use of NeonDB over here. And I also want to show us the package.json because we have some commands that are being set up here. So we have these 4 commands which are unique to Drizzle ORM. So in case you see me run something like a db push or db generate or db migrate, this is the command that is going to be executed over here. So if you use something like Prisma ORM, you should have something that is unique in your case. But the overall idea about Stripe, the subscription, the webhook, everything we're going to be taking a look at here is definitely going to be the same. Okay, so let's come over to Neon. You want to come over to neon.com and let me show you how you can get your own database URL. You can hit on login or create an account if you do not have one already. I'm already authenticated, so I'm redirected over to console.neon.tech. And over here, you would need to create a new project. So you can hit here, create a new project, give the project a name. And once your project has been created, once you give it a name, you can then hit on this create button over here. I have already created a project, which is this Stripe project over here. And this project, you can hit on this connect, and this connect over here, you see your database URL. And you can reveal your password. Okay, my password is already revealed. You can hide or reveal your password. And then you can copy this here. You want to make sure you copy this and make sure you have connection pooling on. If you check this information icon here, you see it uses PG Bouncer to put connections, which is recommended for most cases. If you're using something like Prisma ORM, you would want to also like go over to the direct URL and the database URL. So you're going to make use of the direct URL for migration, and you want to make sure you're making use of this URL for connecting or to establish connection to your database. All right, so now you have this here. Let's come back to the application. Let's quickly walk through the different files and folders that we have here. I'll just try to be quick so that we can go right into the topic, which is the Stripe integration here. Let's start. Most of these should look familiar if you have been working with Next.js. So I will just discuss a little bit about this Drizzle config. If you go over to Drizzle, you would see that this is the way the Drizzle config now works. You have this defined config and you pass all of these here, like the output, the schema, the dialect, as well as the DB credentials. The next thing we're going to take a look at here is the source folder. And here we have the proxy.ts, and what's going on here, we have protected routes and we have authentication routes. So because we are making use of NextAuth is being set up inside the lib auth.ts here. You see we have these different methods that we are exporting. This is where we set up the credentials, authentication, the callback, the session, the pages. So over here in proxy, if we have a session here, we're making use of this auth that we are exporting from NextAuth. And with this session, we say if there is no session, we want the user to log in. But if we have a session, we want to redirect the user to the dashboard route. So this is all that's going on here for now in this proxy.ts. We have this plans.ts inside the lib, which is where we define our plans. You see we have some to-dos because we have some price IDs, which we are also going to set up in Stripe. What else do we have here? We have these features, which is a way that I like to separate the different features in the application, the authentication feature, the billing feature, the dashboard feature, everything here. But for now, there are no components in the dashboard. And if we check the billing, we have the billing action, which also contains a bunch of to-dos that we haven't implemented yet. Okay, so we're going to be implementing all of these here during this course. We have authentication. I don't think we need to go into authentication. It's not the scope of this tutorial. And here in DB we have the index.ts, more Drizzle ORM configuration, where we set up our schema inside this file. And for now, we only have a user schema. We are definitely going to be updating or changing this user schema. We're going to add the subscription schema, the subscription enums, things like that. So you want to keep your eyes open for the schema.ts. In your case, if you have something like a profile, you just want to find something that is unique, a unique identifier, a unique schema or a unique table or something that's unique to users within your own application. If you call it profile, if you call it users, the idea remains the same. Over here, we just have simple fields that you would expect a user to have in an application. So ID, email, name, password hash, created at and updated at, and that's all. And in the app, we have the different pages. We have the layout page, which just does nothing. We just have fonts that are being set up here, and it wraps or returns children. So nothing much is going on here. We have the page.tsx, which displays the overall page. So if you come over to the landing page, this is the content you're going to see. And over here, we have the auth layout, organization layout. That's why we have this parentheses. Over here, we have the layout. Nothing is going on here in the auth layout. It's just like a wrapper around these two pages that we have here. The register page, which shows a sign up form. We're not going to go much into this, but if you come here, you can see the use action state. We build up our form, our card, everything as you expect a sign up form to have. I'll just exit this. And that's the same for the login page. Okay, so just the same for the login page. And what else? The dashboard. we have the dashboard, and then we have pages that are under the dashboard. We have this layout here, which is checking for authentication once again, because we want to make use of this session here, just to make sure that this session or null, we can actually not have null over here. We know we have a session.user. So that's why we are just doing all of these. If there is no session user, we want to redirect to login. The proxy is already going to catch this, okay? But this is just for us to have type safety in the pages. And then we have the analytics page. This page is going to be like a page where we expect paid users to not be able to, users that are not subscribed to our pro plan will not be able to see the content of this page. It's just going to be blurred out for them. And same for the billing page as well. So we have some to do that we just have here. All right, so let's get into the action. I think that's pretty much everything. We have the pricing page, which shows our pricing plans, and the success page, which is going to be called for us whenever subscription is successful. So start up your application. You want to make sure you run npm dev, which is going to spin up our local development server on localhost port 3000. And if you come here and hit on refresh, you would see that you're going to view the content of the dashboard page. If for some reason you're not able to see the content, then you need to sign in, and once authenticated, you would see this dashboard page. This is the analytics page where we have this blurred out screen. So when users upgrade to pro, so if we hit here, they go back to the pricing. This is the page where they can see, like, annually they're paying $99, monthly they're paying $12, okay? And then we have the billing page where users can manage their subscription. Okay, so that's the project walkthrough. Let's get started with our Stripe integration. And we're gonna start up by defining the different models that we need to make this happen. We need to install Stripe, okay? So let's say npm add Stripe like this, which is gonna go on and add Stripe into our project. And then we're gonna have it as part of dependencies of our project over here. So now Stripe has been installed. You can see we have changes in the package.json as well as the npm log YAML file. Let's create a Stripe singleton, and we're going to do that in the source folder inside the lib. We're going to create a new file this time around for Stripe. So here, let's create a stripe.ts file. In here, we're going to import Stripe from Stripe, and then we're going to export const Stripe, and Stripe is going to be equal to this new Stripe that we have over here. And we need to set up the environment variables for the Stripe secret key. Now we also need to set up pass-through values here, which is like the API version as well as the TypeScript true. And if you get this error, you can always double check here. If you say control spacebar, and then you're going to see the value that you should apply to this API version. And once you do that, you can hit on save. We need to add the Stripe secret key to our environment variable. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'll come over to the env example. I'm just going to drop this in here and add this. But then I'm also going to come right into the env, and I want to add this over here. And we're going to get the secret key in a moment, but let's continue building out the application, because we also need to set things like the webhook secret and also the next public Stripe publishable key. Now we need to make changes to our schema. Let's come right into the DB, and right here in DB inside the schema.ts. Now we're going to define things like the enums, which is like subscription status, and also over here we're going to make change to the users table. So over here, let's export const. We're going to call this subscription status enum, and this is going to be equal to PG enum. We don't have it here, so let's also import this, which will come in from Drizzle ORM core. And this is going to take like the enum name, which we're going to call subscription underscore status. And then we're going to pass this list over here, which are the values, okay? So what values are we going to have? We're going to have active, we're going to have canceled, and we're also going to have past due. And then we're going to have trailing, and we're going to have two more, which is incomplete. And the last one is going to be unpaid, okay? So here let's have unpaid. So these are the different subscription status that we're going to have, and then we're going to add this subscription customer, the Stripe customer ID, to the users table. So this in your users table, somewhere around here, maybe after the password hash, I'm going to add the Stripe customer ID text, and in here we're going to have the text builder initial, which is going to be Stripe customer ID. And not just this, we want to make sure that this is also unique. So we're going to say dot unique like this. Okay, so each customer is going to have the Stripe customer ID, which is unique to them. Now we're going to have the subscriptions table. So just right below here, let's say export const subscriptions, which is also going to make use of this subscription status enum. So we're going to have the subscriptions over here, which is going to be equal to a new PG table. Let me just cover this over here. And here the identifier is going to be for subscriptions. And in here, we're going to have the different fields in the table. So we're going to have the ID, which is going to be UUID, default random, and it's also going to be a primary key. Then we're going to have the user ID. The user ID is also going to be a UUID, where we're going to have the user underscore ID as the identifier. And I'm going to just fix this real quick. So user ID identifier. And then I'm going to say dot not null, because we also want to make sure that a subscription definitely belongs to a user before we chain on the references. Okay, so here we're going to have dot references, and the reference is going to be users dot ID. And before we close this up, we want to make sure we have on delete cascade here, just like this. Now we're going to have the Stripe subscription ID next. So here let's have the Stripe subscription ID, and this is going to be of type text, and this is going to be Stripe subscription ID, and this is going to be unique, and it's also going to be not null as well. And then we're going to have the next one, which is Stripe price ID. So Stripe price ID, which is going to be a text. And we have the next one, which is going to be the Stripe current end period. So Stripe current period end, current period end. And then this is going to be type timestamps, okay, and it's going to be not null. Now we have three more, which is going to be the status, and the status is going to be subscription status enum, where we have the status here. It's going to be not null. So this subscription status enum, remember that we set it up over here, and then we're going to say not null and give it a default, and the default is going to be incomplete. Okay, is that the default? No, the default here is going to be incomplete, just like this. And then we're going to have the created at as well as the updated at, which is pretty much straightforward. Created at, default now, not null, and updated at is also going to be default now. Before we close this up, let's make sure we're exporting the types. We have the type user, we have the type new user. We're also going to have the type for subscription, and lastly, we're going to have a type for new subscription, just like this. You can see the difference here, the infer select, and this is the infer insert. Now we just need to push this database over to Neon. So what we are going to do is pnpm-db push. So pnpm-db column push like this, which is then going to push our changes over to our Neon database, as you can see over here. And if you take a look at the package.json, what this pnpm-db push command does, you can see over here that is called the Drizzle kit push. Okay, now it says you're about to add user Stripe customer ID unique constraint to the table which contains one item. That's because I already had the user there. I authenticated. If this statement fails, you receive an error from database. Do you want to truncate users table? I'll say no. Add the constraint without truncating the table, and let's give this a moment. Changes applied. So let's come over to our Neon, and if we take a look at the tables, let's see. Now we have the subscription table. These are the different columns that we have over in the table, and in the users table we have this user because I created an account with the ID, the email, the name, and we have the Stripe customer ID, which is null. Okay, and then we also have subscriptions, which is of type subscription, and you can see the subscription here is having all of these values. Now what's going to happen is, now we are done with this, I'm just going to clear. The next thing we are going to be doing is to add the Stripe price ID to the plans config that we have over here in the lib folder. Plans over here, we need to go over to Stripe and get the keys that we have. Also, let's double check our env. We need to make sure we have the Stripe secret key, and then over here we want to make sure we have, or we add the Stripe price IDs. Let's come over to Stripe, and here I'm just going to go over to my dashboard. So create an account if you do not have one already, but I do have one, so I'm just going to come over to my dashboard, and in my dashboard we are going to get the keys that we need to set up Stripe. That's key. Let's see if we check our env, that is the Stripe secret key. So somewhere around here you should see the API keys. So you have the secret key as well as you have your publishable key. I'm just going to reject the cookies for now, and then I'm going to copy the Stripe secret key, which is this, and then I'm going to use this over here by just changing the value. Okay, so that's my Stripe secret key, and I would save this. Now the next thing we also need to do is to create the different plans that we have. Now these plans are product, and the ID for, we need to get the price ID for the pro plan. Okay, I don't think we're going to do anything for the free plan. I'm going to explain that in a moment. So let's come over to Stripe, and we need to create products. So in order for us to create products, let's come over to the product catalog here. And what happens is Stripe uses a one product multiple prices model. So we're going to create the product once, and then we're going to attach as many prices as we can or as we need. So in our case, if we check our pricing model, so let me spin up our development server. If we take a look at our pricing page, you're going to see over there that we have two prices. One is going to be the monthly price, and the other one is a yearly price. So that we can find if we come over to the billing page, and let's come over to the pricing page. You can see over here for the pro plan, we have $12 monthly. And if you switch over to the annual, you're going to get $99 yearly. So we have these two plans for our application, and this could happen if you have multiple tiers. So let's say that you have free, you have enterprise, you have another section. The idea is the same. But in this case, we have this, and we also have this price. So how can we manage this in Stripe? We're going to create products and come over to the product catalog, and over here in the product catalog, we want to create a new product. So hit on this, and now you need to give this product a name. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to give it a name of Pro, or I can just go with Pro Plan like this. And then it also needs a description. So I'm just going to, there are no descriptions here, but I'll just say something like for serious. I'll just say something like for serious builders like this. And then you can give images. If you check more options, you can add, you can collect tags, file, and remit, things like that. But we're not going to do all of that here. And I'm not also going to upload an image. And then for the pricing, it's a recurring payment. It's not a one-off payment. And you're going to choose the interval, which is the billing period here. So the billing period is going to be monthly. And for the amount, our application says $12. So over here, we're going to have 12. I want to choose monthly. So here you can have a preview, and if you're okay with everything, then you click on add product. Now this is going to create the product with its first price. As you can see over here, we have this $12 and per month. And if we click into this, we need to add the second price. And the second price here, if we check our UI, is this $99, which is yearly, annually, okay? So back in Stripe, what's going to happen is, let's come over to edit product. So over here, and over here in edit, you can see we now have the option to add another price. So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to give the amount, and the amount here is going to be 99. But for the billing period, we want to make sure that we select yearly because it's not monthly. And then you can also add a description over here, used to organize your prices, and it's not shown to customers. Okay, so you just have that in mind. And you can also choose your pricing model, flat rate, package pricing, all of this. So this is how it's going to look like. The unit quantity is going to be 1, and then you want to hit next. Now you can see the two prices here. And once you update product, you would no longer see like this over here. You now see two prices, and you come back to your product catalog. Now you see two prices. Okay, before we are seeing like monthly here. Now we need the IDs so that we can sync the price IDs over to our application. And let's click into this. We're going to see the IDs for both prices. So let's start with the 12. If we hit on the $12 monthly price, over here you can see the price ID. Want to copy this ID, is going to come in handy. And over here, let's say we're going to store this in the environment variable shortly. So let's come over to our environment variable here, and let's also just create it now. So we're going to call this Stripe underscore pro underscore monthly price ID, something like this. And I'm going to, or you want to paste it, the ID here. Now let's do the same for the annual. So the annual is going to be Stripe pro annual price ID. And let's get that also from Stripe. So I'm going to exit this. And then you want to come over here, which is the price catalog. I think the other, okay. So I'm going to come back here, and let's go over for the one for $99. Now I'm going to click on this for $99. And once you click here, you're going to get the price ID over here. So you want to copy this price ID and have the value over here. Okay, so I'm going to save this real quick because I want to just copy these so that I can update the env.example so that it's always up to date. And I'm going to replace the values with static values over here. So price underscore ID, and the same for here like this. Now let's save this. Before we wrap this up, I want to make some changes to this section over here. And if you notice, we are not going to update the price ID for the free plan. And that's because Stripe will only get involved when money changes hands. And the free plan is just simply making use, or is just our application default state. If a user has no roles in the subscriptions that we created in the lib schema, oops, not here, so in the DB schema, so we have this subscription table and it's referencing the user ID. You see over here users.id. So if a user don't have any role in our subscription table, that means they are on the free plan, and no Stripe product, no price ID, no customer object is needed until they decide to upgrade. Okay, that's why the price ID field that we're going to create in this plan section is just going to be empty. Okay, because Stripe is not going to get involved as money isn't changing hands in this case. So let's update this section. We're going to have the price over here. Monthly, annual is going to be 0, and the price ID is going to remain as empty strings. But what's going to happen now is let's have features, and these features is going to be a list over here where we can say things like basic dashboard, up to 3 projects, community support. This is what your free plan is going to look like in your own application. You're going to more or less want to involve or inform the user about the features that they get on the free plan. Now let's do the same for the pro plan. Now the price ID is going to be different here because the monthly plan as well as the annual plan, they are all now going to come from our process.env. So I'm going to just format this real quick. So the monthly plan over here, as you can see, is still this object where this is coming from the Stripe Pro monthly price ID, which is this over here, and also this over here, just like this. And then we just have some features that we listed over here. Okay, so you want to list things like this. Let's say priority support, 7-day free trial. We're also going to see how we can implement the 7-day free trial now that it comes up. Okay, so now let's save this, and the next thing we're going to do is to make sure that we now work on our billing model, which is going to help us to handle and manage Stripe billing. I'm going to close all these tabs that we have opened, and let's go on and try to create the database operations for our billing. Okay, so that's going to be right inside of our features folder here. We're going to have, or we already have a folder for billing, and then we don't have the billing model. Okay, so let's have the billing .model.ts file here, and here we're going to bring in our database. So let's bring in our DB. Our DB is going to be coming in from @/DB, and if you visit it, it's like, you know, what we're saying, which is the setup for Drizzle ORM. And then we also need to bring in users and subscription, which will come in from our DB schema. So we need subscriptions, and we also need to bring in users. And the last thing we need to bring in here is equal operation from Drizzle ORM. And if you hover on this, you can see it tells that 2 values are equal. That's what we are going to, use it to do. So now we're going to start with the customer. If you do not know what a Stripe customer is, no worries, I'm going to be explaining that in a moment. But let's just have our model. So I'm going to say export async function. And what do we call this function? We're going to call it update user Stripe customer. So customer ID in database. So in database like this, and this is going to take in the user ID, which is a string, and it's also going to take in the Stripe customer ID, which is a string. And here we're going to then have the function body. So the first we're going to have here is const, where we're going to have the user, and this is going to be equal to await db dot, and then we want to say db dot update. I want to update the users table. And we want to say set, this is the way it works in Drizzle ORM. And then we want to set the Stripe customer ID. And we also want to have the field for the updated at, okay? So we're going to have the updated at, which is going to be the new date, so we can keep track of when we made this change. And the next thing we're going to do here is to add the .where clause. So where equal, so where the user.id is equal to this user ID that is being passed over here, so that Drizzle ORM is able to know what role in the column that it needs to update. So what role in the users table that needs to be updated. Okay, now we're going to say dot returning like this, and now it returns over here. If you hover on this, you might see adds a returning clause to the query over here. And see, calling this method, we return the specified fields. That's why we have the array destructor, because it returns the list. If no fields are specified, all fields will be returned. So that's why here we now have the user object. Okay, and if you remove this over here, you're going to see that this is returning a list. Okay, so that's why we have that there. And now we have the user. We want to go on and return the user object here, and we have more functions to create. And this next function is going to be used to retrieve user by Stripe customer ID from database. So let's export a async function, and this is going to be retrieve user by Stripe customer ID. And then this is going to take the Stripe customer ID, which is a string, and I'm just going to close it up here and have the function body. So let's return the db.query.users, and then want to call find first, and we want to find where, just like this, the user Stripe customer ID is equal to the Stripe customer ID that we are receiving from as argument here. And then we're going to have more for the subscriptions. So now we're going to say export async function. We need the function that's going to help us to save subscription to database. And this is going to take in the data, and data is going to be an object. So we're going to have the different fields in a moment. But for now, let's make sure that we close this up here and the function body. Okay, so data is an empty object. So let's have the different fields here. We're going to have the user ID, which is a string. We're also going to have the Stripe subscription ID, which is a string. We're going to have the Stripe price ID. We also need two things, which is the Stripe current end period, which is going to be Stripe current period end. And then we're going to have the status. Okay, so remember we defined status, which is going to be subscription status. Let's see if we can bring this in. Okay, we can bring it in. Let's just type it manually. So we have active, we have cancelled. So let's have the pipe here. We have cancelled. We also have past due. We have trailing. We have incomplete, and we have unpaid. The spelling of this cancelled doesn't sit right with me. Let's just double check the DB schema about the cancelled here. Yeah, it's double L that we have here. So let's make sure. Oh, I see one L. Let me just double check the spelling of cancelled in Google real quick. Yeah, it's actually double L. So I'm just going to update this. So this is what needs to be updated. Oops, to be cancelled. Okay. So now with that done, let's save this. And what's going to happen in here now? We are going to have the await DB. So subscription is going to be await DB.insert. We want to insert subscriptions. And the data is going to be, the values is going to be data that we are getting from here. So this data object, we want to make sure it's returning, and then we're going to return the subscription. Okay, so we still have more. Next is going to be retrieve subscription from database. This is going to be straightforward. Export async function, retrieve subscription in database. Okay, so the fact we're not saying by, let's say, user ID or something like that, it means this is going to just need the subscription, the user ID. So let's have user ID over here. So the user ID is going to be of type string. And here we just want to return db.query.subscriptions.find first, where the subscriptions.user ID is going to be equal to the user ID that we have over here. And we have two more to go. The next one is to update subscription in database. So export async function. Update subscription in database is going to take in the, I'm just going to bring this in real quick. Let's go through it. So it's going to bring in the subscription ID, which is a string, and then the data is not going to be all of these. Yes, it needs the status, but the status is going to be optional. So all the fields here are going to be optional, and can also pass the Stripe price ID as well as the Stripe. So we can pass the Stripe Stripe price ID, and then we can also pass the Stripe current period end over here. And then we can say the db.update subscriptions, and .set is not going to work like this. We want to have this object here because we also want to update the updated at field. So we spread the data that we're getting from here, and then we update the updated at. We have our where clause, we have returning, and then we go on to return the actual subscription. Now the last one we're going to have is to delete subscription from database. So let's have it here, export async function, delete subscription from database. It takes in the subscription ID, and here we're going to await db. So await db.delete, and we're going to have the subscriptions, and lastly we're going to have the where clause where the subscriptions.id is going to be equal to the Stripe ID that we have, the subscription ID. It's meant to be the Stripe subscription ID. Let's just name it that. So Stripe subscription ID like this. Just to avoid any naming confusions. Okay, so we have the billing model done and dusted. We now also need some helpers. We are done with the billing model, so our database operation. Now we're going to create our business logic, and all the business logic is going to live right inside the billing helpers server.ts file. So here we're going to have the billing-helpers.server.ts file. Let's bring in everything we need. First, we need to bring in auth. Auth is going to, we also need to, no, we don't need db. So let's bring in auth. Auth is going to come in from libauth, and we also need to bring in Stripe. So Stripe is going to come in, that's the Stripe single thing that we created. It's going to not come in from like this, it's going to come in from @/lib, and then we're going to bring it in from Stripe here. And why do we have this error? Because we called it Stripe like this with a lowercase s. And the next thing we need to bring in is the helpers from our model. So we need to bring in also retrieve, let's bring in retrieve subscription from database, retrieve subscription in database from database. Let me just update this to be retrieve subscription from database. Okay, so here is going to be retrieve subscription from database, and let me also update this so that it's easier to read. And the last one we need to bring in is to retrieve subscription by Stripe customer ID from database. So retrieve subscription by Stripe customer ID. Okay, so now we're going to have functions. The first function we're going to have is going to get the current user subscription from database. So let's export async function. And this is going to be get user subscription, and then this is going to take in the user ID. User ID is a string, and here we're going to return retrieve. So we're just going to return retrieve subscription from database. And then we're going to export async function, and this is going to be has user has active plan. Okay, and this is the idea for this is for it to return a boolean. Okay, so it's going to return a boolean, and we can already mark it here and say this is going to resolve to a promise, or it's going to return a promise, and the promise is going to resolve to a boolean like this. Now inside this function declaration, we need to make sure we are returning this. That's why we have this error over here. The first thing we're going to do here is to make sure that we go on and get the subscription. So const subscription is going to be await get user subscription. Then we're going to let's see. No, we're going to make use of retrieve. No, we're going to make use of this. So retrieve subscription from database. So let's copy this and make sure we're making use of this retrieve subscription from database. And the next thing we're going to do is to just check if there is no subscription. Let's go and return false. But if there's a subscription, then we're going to return this. So we're going to have this parenthesis so I can write this in multi-line. I'm going to say subscription.status if it's equal to active, or want to say if the subscription.status is equal to trailing. So this is going to resolve into a boolean, and that's why we no longer have any errors there. Now we're going to have another one, which is going to get or create the Stripe customer. Let's export async function, and this is going to be get or create the Stripe customer, and this is going to take in the user object because we want to get or create a Stripe customer. So we need an object, and the user object here is going to have an ID, which is a string, an email, a name, and lastly we want to make sure we have the Stripe customer ID, which is string or null over here. So string or null. And this is going to resolve to a promise. So this is going to return a promise, and the promise is going to resolve to a string just like this. Okay, so we're going to check first if we already have a customer ID. Then we want to go and return the customer ID. So if user.stripe customer ID, we want to return the user.stripe customer ID. Now, otherwise, we are going to go on to create a new Stripe customer. And you might be wondering, hey, what is a Stripe customer? Now, Stripe customer is a Stripe representation of your user inside the Stripe system. And you can go on to think of this like a profile that Stripe is going to keep on file, and it stores the user email, the name, the safe payment methods, and it also stores the billing history and any active subscription that the user might have. Okay, now we're going to create the customer once, and we're going to save their Stripe ID to our own database. So on every future action, things like checkout, portal, cancel, we're going to pass that saved ID to Stripe instead of creating a new customer. Do you understand? And this is going to keep their billing history in one place, and it's also going to avoid duplicate customer records. So for that, we're going to say const customer, and this customer is going to be equal to customer like this. It's going to be equal to await stripe.customers.create, and we close this here. Now we're calling create. We're going to pass the email. The email is going to be users.email, and the name is going to be user.name. And lastly, we also want to have metadata where we pass in this object, which is the user ID. Now we need to save the customer ID to our own database. We have created the Stripe customer. Now we need to save that to our own database. And we can do that by saying await update Stripe customer in ID in database. So we're passing the user ID and the customer ID. So let's be sure that's the order. So it needs the user ID and the Stripe customer ID, which is this. Okay. So if you over here, you see the response, or it responds with a customer object. And now we want to return a string. So we're going to return the customer.id like this. Okay, so this is one helpful function we're going to see this in action. And now the next thing we need to create after creating these helpers is for us to implement the create checkout session. Now, in case you're wondering what is the create checkout section, if you check this billing action, you see this create checkout section. And this is going to be useful in case where we come over here and the user hits on checkout. So once the user hits on this button, let's quickly double check our pricing page. So over in the app, we have the pricing, we have the pages.csx, and we have the pricing plans. Now here in this pricing plans, you see over here where we have the monthly. So give it a moment. Yeah, so if it's authenticated, you should check out, create an account. So once this button is clicked, so this checkout button over here, it calls this create checkout session, and this create checkout session, it calls .bind and all of this. But if we come over to this create checkout session, we can see that it leads over to this action over here. So this is what we need to implement so that whenever a user clicks this, we're going to implement the checkout session so that the user is then redirected over to the session.url. Okay, so we have our use server directive here, which marks it as a server component. And we need to bring in our imports. Okay, so let's import redirect. We also need to bring in auth. We need to bring in Stripe. We need to bring in DB. We need to bring in all of these. So we also need to bring in the users from our DB schema. We also need to bring in these equals that we have seen. Okay, and then we need these helpers as well as this model over here, and then the action result. All right, so let's go over to creating the checkout session. I'm going to get rid of everything that we had here, this to do that we have over here. The first thing we need to do is to get the user session. We want to make sure that whoever is trying to create a checkout session is authenticated in our application. So let's have const session is going to be equal to await auth. And next we're going to check if there is no session.user. We want to return an error over here. Maybe something like unauthorized is going to work. And we can close this over here. Now we have this error return over here because type string, error string is not assignable to type never. That's because over here we have this never here. It should be action results. And now the next thing we need to do is to get the full user record from database because we need the Stripe customer ID. So for that, we're going to come over here and say const user is going to be equal to await db.query just like this, dot users, dot find first. I want to find the user where the ID is going to be equal to session dot user dot ID, and then we can close this off here, just like this, here like this. Okay, so this is something that should be in the model file. We don't want to directly access DB over here, so you can move this to the model. And the reason why this is super helpful, having it all in the model, let's say we change up from Drizzle ORM to Prisma ORM, only one file is going to change. We're not going to go over looking for where we are manually calling our DB to make sure that everything is in sync. And that's why it's just a good practice to make sure that your database queries all live right inside the model file. Okay, so that's just an aside, and let's have a check here. If we do not have any user, let's return an error which says user not found, and then we can continue to check if the user is already subscribed. Okay, because if a user is subscribed, then you know, we do not need to continue, right? So let's have const existing subscription. This is going to await retrieve subscription from database, and we're passing the user ID, and then let's check the subscription status. So if existing subscription, I want to check the status. Okay, it's the status that is really important here. If the status is equal to active, so in this case we are going to return this error that user already has an active subscription. And then the next thing we're going to do is to get or create a Stripe customer. That's the next thing we want to do, because we are creating a checkout session. So let's check if this user is already in our database, if we already have the Stripe customer. If that's not the case, then we're going to create one. Okay, so we're going to have this const Stripe customer ID is going to be equal to await get or create Stripe customer. And then we're going to pass the ID, which is equals to users.id. We're also going to pass the email, which is equals to users.email. And then we're also going to pass the username, which is user.name. And then the Stripe customer ID, which is going to be user.stripe customer ID or null. Okay, so let's just have this check over here or null, just like this. Now we are going to create the checkout session. And the checkout session in Stripe is, we know session. It's a checkout session in Stripe is a Stripe hosted payment page where the users are being sent to, because we don't want to build our own card form. So we tell Stripe what the user is buying, which is going to be, the Stripe is going to know based on the price ID. Remember over here, we did set up the price ID. So we're telling the user, hey, this is what the user is buying. This is who the customer is, which is the Stripe customer, and this is where we want you to send the user after payment succeed or when they cancel. So from there on, with all this information, Stripe is going to handle everything in between the card input, the security, let's say the receipts, Apple Pay, everything. Okay, so once created, the session is going to have the session.url, and we're going to redirect the user to that session.url. Okay, and when they finish paying, Stripe is going to redirect them back to our success URL. And it's important that we do not trust the redirect as a proof of payment. We're always going to wait for the webhook. We're going to discuss webhook soon, like a webhook with the case of checkout session completed. So that event, then we're going to confirm that everything worked on the server side. We're not going to use the redirect to confirm. Okay, so now we're going to have the checkout session here. Let's go on and so now we need to create the checkout session, but let's pass more information to it. We just have the customer here, which is this Stripe customer ID. So let's visit this once more. We see that we are getting, or we are creating the Stripe customer. Here we are checking if there is no user.stripe customer ID. We want to return user.stripe. If user.stripe customer ID, we'll just want to return it. Otherwise, we're going to use Stripe to create a customer. Then we update the user in the database and we return the customer ID. So that's why over here, we are going to have the Stripe customer ID with all of these details. And then we also have the checkout session here, which we are going to be creating now. Okay, so we just discussed what a checkout session is in Stripe. And we pass the customer, we also want to pass the mode. And this mode is going to be, it's a payment, setup, subscription. So in our case, we are handling subscription over here. And the next thing we're going to have is the payment method types. So payment method types, and we're going to have card. You have other options here. Do we get the options? You can see Affirm, Alipay, Amazon Pay, Blick, all these payment types. But in our case, we're just going to make use of card. And what else do we have? We have the line items. So line items, and this is going to be a list here where we are going to pass the items. So the items here is this that we have created. So this product we created, if we check our products catalog, we created this product with two prices. So this product over here, we have one price, which is $12, and we have the other price, which is $99. This is a yearly subscription, and this is a monthly subscription. So now we're going to pass the IDs over here, and that's the price. So let's have the price, and the price we're going to pass here is the price ID. Remember, here we have the price ID. And how are we passing this price? How are we getting this price ID? How do we know the price ID? Remember, over here in this page, over here where we have the price and plans, if we visit this component once more, you're going to see over here that we are passing null because we're making use of .bind, and we're passing the checkout price ID. Now this is going to have our plans over here. So where do we have our plans? Okay, we already have the features over here. So here you see we have our plans, and in these plans that we defined in our library, that's where we set up the, so if we go to the definition, you can see over here the price ID. So based on this price ID, the component is able to know, maybe do some calculations over here, the pro price, which you can see over here, as well as the checkout price ID. And then over here, it is passing the checkout price ID over to this function, which is our action. So now in our action over here, that's where we get the price ID, and we forward this price ID back to Stripe, as well as the quantity, which is 1. Now we have some things, other things to set up, like the success URL, and that's why our env, if you double check your env file over here, you already have this next auth URL and next public application URL. So let's continue. We're going to have the success URL, and this is the next public application URL, which we just saw now. So /success, and we have a success page, which is this page over here. We have this success page, but we want to also add some, the session ID. So we're going to say this param over here, session ID, is going to be equal to the checkout session ID equals to this. Now this is going to look weird because you're saying, hey, checkout session ID, you're meant to have maybe like this, and this is going to be valid JavaScript, but this doesn't look like actually valid JavaScript. Okay, so you're going to be like wondering what's actually going on here, but this is actually a Stripe template variable, and it's not a JavaScript variable. Okay, and Stripe is going to go and replace this. So this checkout session ID, Stripe is going to replace it themselves with a real session ID before it goes on to redirect the user. Okay, so the flow is going to be, you send Stripe just this string literal over here, and Stripe is going to replace it to something like this over here, and it's going to remove this. Okay, so it's Stripe, it doesn't look like it's valid JavaScript, but Stripe is going to understand this. Now after the success URL, we also want to have the cancel URL, which is going to go back to the pricing page, and then we have the subscription data. So we want to pass the subscription data here, and here in the subscription data, we're going to have the trial period, the days, which is 7 days trial period. So remember, we did set it up somewhere here when we were setting up, so the 7-day trial period. And next thing we're going to have is the metadata. Now this metadata, we're going to be able to retrieve this back from when the webhook is triggered. No worries, we're going to see this in action, but in this metadata, we can pass the user ID, which is going to be equal to user ID. So for this subscription data metadata. Now for the overall metadata here, we can also pass the user ID, which is going to be equal to user ID. Okay, so now we have all of these. We are going to see this metadata and how we can retrieve this from the webhook. Let's check if there is no session URL. That means it failed to create the checkout session URL. So over here, let's have a check if there is no, so if there is no checkout session URL, just like this, we want to return an error that it failed to create the checkout session. But if everything was successful, Then we're going to redirect the user to the checkout session.url. Okay, so we have written a bunch of code over here to create the checkout session. Before we go on to try this out, let's also make sure that we have this, which is the create portal session. Let's also create this. Let's work on the create portal session, which is going to be implemented in the billing page. Okay, so this is the page. Let's go back here. And this is the billing page where, this billing portal that we have over here. If we click on it, we have this error, implement Stripe billing portal, which is what we are going to be working on right now. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to make sure to start with this, that this is not returning never. This is returning the action result type. And then we can get rid of everything that we do have here. So let's start by first having access to the user session. So const session over here is going to be equal to await auth. We can have our check if no session.user. Then want to return redirect here, or unauthorized, sorry. And then let's close this here. So we return this unauthorized object. Now we're going to check, try to get the user from database. So const user is going to be await db.users.find first. I want to find where just like this. So we're saying db.users.query.users.find first, where the user ID is equal to session.user ID, just over here. And then we can close this up here, just like this. So at this point, we have the user. Now we are going to also go on and check the Stripe customer ID. If no user, like this, if no user here, the Stripe customer ID, then we want to return an error, because at this point the user should have a billing account or something like that. Because if the user do not have a billing account, why would you then want to manage your billing? Do you understand? So we come back to the billing page. Why would you want to go back to the billing portal? So at this point the user do not have this, so we're just going to return an error, any error here. Okay, so we're going to say, rather than explicitly say no Stripe customer ID, we can say no billing account or no billing information found, something like this. So now let's go on to create the Stripe portal session. Now, in case you're wondering what is a Stripe portal session, now a portal session over here is a Stripe hosted page where users can manage their own subscriptions. Okay, so they can manage it by canceling it, reactivating it. They can also swap to a different plan, things like updating their card details. Maybe they want to download past invoices. These are things that users would want to manage on their own. So we're not going to build any of that UI ourselves, because the kind of work that's going to come into that. So in that case, we want to leave all the heavy lifting to Stripe. We just create a portal session, which is going to give them a short-lived URL, and then it's going to redirect the user there. And then when they are done, Stripe is going to send them back to our own URL, and any changes they make, like canceling, is going to trigger a webhook. We haven't seen it yet. So if they go on and they cancel their subscription on our application, it's going to trigger a webhook, and then we can make changes to our database or anything like that. Stripe is going to give us the information, like saying, hey, this user canceled their subscription. It's going to fire the webhook to us, and then we can update our database accordingly. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to say const portal session is going to Stripe equal to stripe.billing portal, and then we have the sessions.create, and it needs the customer. So we're going to pass the customer ID, so the Stripe customer ID, and it also needs the return URL. So remember when I said once the user is done, Stripe is going to redirect the user back to our own application. So this is where we say, hey, once you're done with managing your subscription, please, this is where we want the user to be redirected to. And then we can close it up here like this. Now we need to handle the redirect. So we're going to say if, or we can just say redirect here to the portal session.url. All right, so now we're going to save this, and now we need to make sure that we have everything set up in our pricing plans. I don't know why we have this error. That's because the string undefined is not assignable to type void. So let me just double check. Or we can ignore the error. I know the error is a TypeScript error that we have somewhere. Let's ignore the error so it doesn't take much of our time. And let's make sure we have the pricing page wired up. Let's make sure that everything is working accordingly. What's going to happen is I'm going to close all the tabs that we have open. And let's focus on the pricing page, so which is this page over here. So let's come over here. If you hit on upgrade to pro, then it brings you over to the pricing page. Now this page, we can see we have the session and we check if the user is authenticated. So let's check this price and plans component, which is the component that we have been working on. So it's authenticated is false by default. And what do we do with if the user is authenticated? Okay, so we just use it for the content of this page over here. All right, so let's focus on this over here, the card footer, because now we say, or we show the user this checkout button. And when the user clicks on this checkout button, we call this create checkout session here, which is this server action file that we have over here. And we create this subscription for the user. We create a Stripe customer. We create the checkout session, and we redirect the user to the checkout session. Now over here, let's have in mind we have this success URL, which is where the user is going to be redirected to. And if the user cancels, the user will come back to the pricing. Quickly, remember what I told you about this checkout session ID. Let's come over to the success page, which is this page over here. So we are going to try it out. I want to see the user being directed over to this page. I know for now we are not verifying the session and all of that, but let's see if everything is okay. So we're going to come over here and let's go for the annual subscription here. Okay, let's start off with the monthly. And then I'm going to hit on checkout. We're not showing any like redirect or anything here or any like loading state. But in your real application, you want to give the user a hint. But now we have a data. So you must provide one of price or price with line of prices. Okay, so we have this error over here. Let's come back to the billing action. So that means over here where we have this price. So this line item, the price ID, it means it's not being passed across here in the server action. So let's double check here. So we have this checkout price ID. Let's just check over here what is the price ID. So I'm just going to log to the console here. So console.log checkout session ID. Remember that this is called on the server side, so we're going to see the log over here. I'm just going to quit this and just give this a full refresh so that we can see this in action. And I'm going to refresh the pricing page. Okay, so now I'm going to hit checkout again. Let's take a look at the log and you see it's undefined. Now the reason you're seeing undefined is the way Next.js works when it comes to reading values from the environment variable. So let's come over here. I'm going to save this. And if you check the price and plans, you would see this checkout price ID. It's trying to read this from the env as, so let's come over to the plans. So if we come over to this plans section over here, it's trying to read this like without the next public. So without the next public, that's where everything happens unless it's called on the server side. So because it's not called on the server side, so we have this error. So we're going to attach the next underscore public here and also here and save this. And then we also need to update our env to attach the next public here. So let's have the next public here and save this. And let's also update the env.example. Let's also have the next public here like this and save this. Now with these changes, okay, after making changes to the env, it had to perform a full reload. So let's, no, this is actually due to runtime error. But after changing the env, we can see it reloaded over here. But let's just quit it just to be double sure. And let's go with pnpm dev again. So now if we come back over to the billing action without the console.log, okay, let's have it back here. Yep, so and let's save this. Now let's come over here and also give this a refresh. Now I'm going to hit on checkout and you're going to see this time around it's going to work. We're going to get redirected over to the Stripe checkout page. And let's give this a moment. You can see it's loading and now we are here. Now there's something that I want us to have in mind before we check this out. Remember that you should always be in like the test mode. Whenever you're testing things out, you want to make sure you are currently on test mode. You haven't actually verified your business, so by default you would be on the test mode. Okay, so that's something you should have in mind so that you're not spending real money. So Stripe gives us this test card that we can use to test the successful payment, and we have the 4004000000341 that we can also use to check or to test if a payment failed. Okay, so this is the card we can use to test that a payment actually succeeded. And for the month, you want to make use of any future months. I'm going to say 11, and for the year, I would just say 27, like this. And then for the CVV, also you just need to use any 3 digits number, lari. And then I'm going to start trial. So you can see, because we enable the 7-day trial period, which is over here. So try pro plan, 7 days free period. And then you're going to start to be charged this amount per month starting from this date, and it's for serious buyers. Okay, and you can see the current date is 3rd, and 7 days from now makes it 10th of May, and that's why we have this 7-day trial period. So now you hit trial, it's going to process, and then it's going to be successful, and then you can see we're going to be redirected. You see this checkout session ID, this is what I was telling you. So you see Stripe knows that it needs to populate this with the actual session ID, and our pro plan is now active. Technically it's not active yet because we are not making use of anything in our database to show that it's active. But if we come back to, we are not using the webhook to actually update this, but if we come back to Neon and let's give this a refresh, we want to take a look at the Stripe customer ID, and you see the Stripe customer ID is now populated, because over here, if we take a look, I'm just going to delete this, because over here, if we take a look at the checkout session, you can see this get or create Stripe customer. And if we come right into this, you can see it's updated our database. So update user Stripe customer ID in database. This is where the updates happened. This is where the customer got created. The updates happened. We returned the Stripe customer ID. We used it to create the session, and then we redirected the user to this session, checkout session.url, just after creating the session. Now, Stripe must have, tried to find a way to let us know that, hey, a user actually made payments, but we need to find a way to read data so that we can update our data. I'm going to close all of these that we have opened here. So let me close to the right and also close these others here. That's because we need environment variables. So we need 3 more environment variables. The first one we need is the Stripe secret key. Oh, we actually have the Stripe secret key here. So we need the webhook secret, so the Stripe webhook secret, and we also need the next public Stripe publishable key. So I'm going to save this, and let's come over to the env, and let's also add this here. So the Stripe webhook secret, as well as the Stripe next public Stripe publishable key. Let's see how we can get the next public Stripe publishable key. And if you come over to Stripe, we're going to make it of the documentation in a moment, and let's come back to our home page. We should see the API keys here. This is our publishable key. You want to go on and copy over this publishable key. And by the way, we created the customer here. So if we check the customer, you're going to see this customer that we created just now previously. So let's give this a moment for it to load up, and you can see this is the customer, 3rd of May, which is like the date for me now, and the total spend is 0.00 because we have the 7-day trial period, and this is the last payment over here. And you can like create invoice, create subscription, that kind of stuff here. And you can see, you'll be imagining, hey, this customer is on a free trial. So what happens when, or how do I go on to charge the customer once the 7-day trial period elapses? Stripe is going to call that automatically for us because Stripe is keeping track of the trial period. They know that this customer is on a free trial. So you see over here, if you click into it, they know when the free trial ends. They know when their next invoice, when the billing is going to go through, and all of that. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. Next, Stripe is going to call for us, and then we need to listen, or we need to create webhooks that we can listen to. Okay, so if you've copied the Stripe publishable key from the home page, you want to come over here and you want to paste this in here like this. So paste in your Stripe publishable key, and in the env, I'm just going to your Stripe publishable key, just leave some comments here. Now, how about the Stripe webhook secret? I'm going to show you how we can also get the webhook secret in a moment, but we need to run some installations. We need to set things up. So if you come over to here, so docs.stripe.com/stripe CLI install, you will see how you can install the Stripe CLI. And actually, what's a webhook? You know, what are the benefits of this webhook? We have discussed the benefits of webhook because that's how we can get information back from Stripe. But the overall idea is, or why webhook is, when a user completes checkout, Stripe is going to redirect them back to our success page, just as we have seen. But then we don't want to trust the redirect to confirm the payment. So if the user gets redirected with the success, and we have on the success page, where do we have it here? So where do we have the success page? We do not want to use this session ID. So that session ID that we saw in the URL, we don't want to make it of that session ID. So this session ID, we don't want to use it to confirm the actual payment. Okay, we cannot trust that. So the reason is the user's browser might close, the user might lose connection, or they might even tamper with it. Okay, so webhooks are a Stripe way of calling our server directly to say, hey, we received the payment, this payment happened, and that's where our source of truth is going to be coming from. And webhook generally is just a HTTP post request that Stripe is going to send over to our server whenever something happens. So whenever a payment succeeds, or whenever a subscription is cancelled, a card is declined, our server is always going to receive the event, and then we can go on and process the event, things like writing to our database, also sending the user an email, and then we're going to respond with a 200 to say, okay, this was received. So no matter what happens, you always want to make sure that you are returning 200 in your webhook. So you want to also always make sure that your webhook is returning the status code of 200, else Stripe is going to think if maybe your webhook is broken, and then they might stop sending events over to your webhook. Okay, so always return 200, send the user an email, make sure that your application security is solid, then you can go on to return 200 status code. I don't know if other payment providers, behave that way, but I'm sure it works most of the time for some of the payment providers. Okay, so let's install the Stripe CLI. The Stripe CLI is going to come in handy. So if you're on Windows, this is the command that you need to, or this is the way you can go on to download the Stripe CLI. If you're on Mac, this is how you can do this, but I'm going to make it of Homebrew. You can see how easy it is here. So I'm going to copy this command here, open up my terminal, and I'm going to paste it in here. So brew install stripe /stripe-checkout/stripe. All right, so once you have that installed, the next thing we need to log into Stripe, just as we see here. So the next thing we need to do is to log into Stripe. So we need the Stripe login. Then you're going to press enter on your keyboard to complete the authentication in the browser. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to come back here and give this a moment for the download to complete. It just completed for me. I'm going to paste in the Stripe login command. So now we have the Stripe CLI. We can now say things like Stripe login. Then I'm going to hit enter to open this up in the browser. So I'm going to just hit enter like this. It opens up over here in the browser, and we should be authenticated. And let's see what it tells us. Give this a moment. Let's see, our terminal is waiting for confirmation. You see this here, verification received. So I get a verification sent over to my email for me to verify this. So I'm just going to, so it has come in here. So I will just type this in, and then I'm going to say continue. And now we need to verify that the pairing code matches the one that is shown in the CLI. So just always double check that it does match. And if it does match over here, you're going to see the pairing code here. If it does match, you want to allow access. And now access should have been, the CLI is now configured for this with this account over here. So it's going to expire in 90 days. At this point, you need to re-authenticate yourself. So you need to also go on and say Stripe login again. So I'm just going to clear this, and I'm also going to exit from here. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is to make sure that we start forwarding webhook events over to our local server. So that's what we're going to be working on. How can we configure Stripe? How can we test Stripe that whenever we have an event, so whenever a user maybe creates a payment, or maybe payment failed or whatever, how can we test Stripe? Hey, forward it to this URL. And the way we can do that is to say Stripe listen, and then we're going to say forward to, and then we paste in the path or the API endpoint where Stripe is going to be forwarding those events to. So let's say Stripe, maybe we can see all the commands, all the flags that we can have over here. So we want to look for listen, and you can see over here, these are webhook commands. We're going to try trigger to trigger or to test webhook events. We're going to see this also shortly. But the listen command here says listen for webhook events. So we want to say, hey, this is where you want to listen to those webhook events, this URL. So we're going to say Stripe listen, and then we're going to say -- forward, and we're going to say forward to, and then we're going to say localhost colon 3000 / API / webhook / webhooks / Stripe. Please make sure you don't have any typo here, otherwise it's not going to work as expected, because we need to create this. Okay, now this is going to give us our webhook secret, and we're going to copy that. So you can see over here, your webhook sign-in secret is this. We want to make sure we copy this. So just right click and copy, or whatever way you can copy with your terminal. I'm going to hit Ctrl+C to quit. Okay, so the URL, I'll just leave this open. I would not clear it, so we can see /API. We have the API endpoint, but we need another folder for webhooks, for Stripe, and then the route.ts file, or whatever way you handle or create routes in your own application. Okay, so now you've copied this. Let's make sure our maybe somewhere here we want to paste this in and save this here. Okay, so that's your Stripe webhook secret. So let's exit this, and let's go on to create the route handler. So remember, this is in the app, in the app over here, and then we have the APIs folder, and inside the API we need webhooks with the S. So webhooks like this, and in there we need a Stripe path, so Stripe, and in there we then need a route.ts file. All right, so how can we then set this up? This is a Next.js route handler. So this is your API route. We need to import headers, and headers is going to be coming in from next headers. We also need to bring in the type of next request. So let's import type, and type is going to be next request, which is going to come in from next server. Then we also need to import Stripe from Stripe. So Stripe like this. We also need our local Stripe singleton, so we're going to also import Stripe, and it's going to come in from our lib Stripe. And then we need all the billing models that we have created, or most of them. So let's import all of these, and they'll be coming in from @features billing model. So what do we need? We need to save subscription to database, because we would need to create subscription. We also need to update subscription in database, so update subscription in database. And we need to delete the subscription from database is when the user actually cancels their subscription. And we need the last one to retrieve subscription from database. Subscription, nope, so not this, retrieve user by subscription customer, by Stripe customer ID from database. Now we're going to set up the route handler. And how do we set up route handlers? We're going to export async function. And this async function is going to be post. The post is actually required because webhooks are going to get called with post request, not get request. So this has to be post. And here we're going to have access to the request. We can just call it rec like this. And in here, let's write the code. All right, so yeah, let's do that. And we can say const body is going to be equal to await request.text. Now, why are we saying request.text? And this is important because Stripe actually requires the raw body to be able to verify the signature, and we never need to pass this as JSON before we verify. And const headers list is going to be equal to await headers like this, and then we need the signature. So const signature is going to be equal to headers list.get, and the signature is going to be the Stripe signature here. So let's just get rid of this like this. Now, what else do? We're going to check if we do not have the signature. So if for some reason the signature is missing, we want to return a new response. So we're going to return new response missing Stripe signature with a status of 400 here, because definitely there's going to be a signature when Stripe calls it. So we're just going to have the status of 400 here. Now, I want to go on and verify this webhook signature because we don't just want to trust it, okay? So let's say let event is going to be equal to stripe.event. And then we can have a try catch block over here. So try catch block. And we're going to come over to the catch block in a moment, but let's start off with the try block. So now in the try block, we're going to have this event that we defined over here. It's going to be equal to stripe. It's going to be equal to stripe.webhooks, not web endpoint. So stripe.webhooks.construct event. Now construct event takes in the payload, the header, the secret, and also tolerance. So we're going to pass the payload, which is the body, and then the signature, which I do not see here. But yeah, that's the way we are meant to work with it. So here we're going to pass in the body here, and then we're going to pass in the signature, and then we need to pass in the webhook secret. Okay, so that's the next thing that we need to pass in here. So the payload, the header, and the secret. So let's pass in the secret. We're going to say process.env.stripe webhook secret. Remember the secret that we just dropped in our over in our .env file. So that's it. So this secret over here. Now that we have this, the next thing we need to do is to check our error case. Okay, so let's handle our error case. So in case we do have an error, let's log it to the console. We're going to log it to the console, but we do not want to log let's log the entire error to the console. And then we want to return a new response that's going to say invalid signature like this. Now we have verified the signature. The next step is for us to handle the event type. So we're going to take some time and then look at how we can go on to handle the different events, because we don't want to handle the entire event. We want to handle specific events. So what events are actually unique to application? Those are the events that we want to actually have in our code base. So we don't say, hey, whatever event is, we are handling. So we just want to make sure we are picking up specific events. Let's come just after this here, and let's have the try block. So the try catch block here. So the catch block here like this. Now let's start off with the try block, and we're going to switch, so we can switch between different event types. And if you hover on event type over here, you can see we have different event types, like 242 more events. So we don't want to handle all these events because that's going to be a security issue in our application. We don't know how the user can exploit one of the events that we are calling to update data in our database. Okay, so we're going to listen to only specific events that matters to us. Now, one event that matters to us is the checkout session completed. And what is this checkout session completed? This is going to be fired when a user successfully completes the Stripe checkout page. And let's say, so when the user completes a subscription, this is going to be called for us, and now it gives us the information, and based on this information we can go on to create a subscription role in our database. So remember last time out when we tried this, it worked. So we had the Stripe customer ID, but if you come over to subscription, there is no subscription over here. So it's currently refreshing. You're going to see there's no subscription for this user. So this user, you see, no rows. We were not able to create a subscription, so our application doesn't know if we have a subscription. Now this is where we're going to change that. Whenever this is triggered, we are going to create the checkout subscription completed. So here we're going to handle checkout. We're going to await handle checkout session completed, and then we're going to pass the event.data.object as so why do we have this error? So it cannot find name. We're going to implement this in a second. So we're going to pass this here as Stripe checkout session. Okay, and after this we want to make sure that we go on to have our break statement somewhere around here, just like this. So let's continue, and we're going to create the different event handlers down below. Once we are done with this, I'm just going to collapse the sidebar so we can have more space. Now the next event we're going to work on is the customer subscription updated. So let's have that case over here where the customer subscription updated here like this. So customer subscription updated. Now, when is this update, customer subscription updated? When is it going to be called? So why are we listening to this? This is going to be called whenever anything about the subscription changes. Things like when the trial period ends and maybe the user starts getting billed, because currently we are in the trial period. This is going to get called. Maybe when the user switches plan in the billing portal, this is always also going to get called. When the user cancels subscription, so things like that is not going to get called. And now we want to go on and also update our database so that it's in sync to whatever Stripe has. We don't want to be out of sync with Stripe here. We're going to await a function, and we can call this a handler. Oops. And we can call this handle subscription updated, and then we pass the event to it. Now the next one is going to be when the customer subscription is deleted. So let's have that case. Let's not forget the break here, and let's have that case over here. So case is going to be customer subscription deleted, and if the user deletes the subscription, then this is going to get fired. Okay, whenever the subscription maybe expires, either because the cancel period ends date was reached, so when the user got to the cancel period, it expired and the user did not renew, or the payment failed, let's say after too many times, then Stripe gave up. Okay, that's when the subscription deleted is going to be called. So when Stripe kept on trying to bill the user, it's not working and it gave up, then this endpoint is going to be called. So let's call the handle subscription deleted, and then we're also going to pass the event to it and have our break over here. Now the last one we're going to have is the invoice payment failed, which is going to get called whenever a renewal payment fails. So things like the card is expired, or the card is declined, or maybe the subscription is not deleted yet, and Stripe is going to retry the charge over the next few days. Stripe is just going to keep on doing what is called dunning. Dunning is like trying to retry the card. Okay, so now we're going to have it here. So we're going to call this invoice payment failed. So case not invoice paid, invoice payment failed, just like this. So let's close this up here, and we're going to await handle invoice payment failed as Stripe invoice, and then we're going to have the break here. And finally, let's have a default, and for default we're going to say console.log1, and then we're going to have a break over here. So we'll just log it to the console, we have a break, and in case of any error here, we are going to log it to the console, so console.error, and then want to return a response that says maybe internal server error, something like 500, and then you always want to return 200. So after all of these, you always want to return 200 so that Stripe is going to know that you received the event, and that is what we even get a suggestion for it over here. Always return 200. Okay, it's for Stripe to know that, hey, we received this. Okay, so we're going to return a new response, maybe null, we're not sending any information, and 200 here. So we're going to just leave this comment here, always return 200 to acknowledge receipt of the event, and then we can save this. All right, so we have event handlers that we need to create. So we have these 4 event handlers. We're going to be creating these 4 event handlers next. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 events. Let's start with the handle checkout session completed. And where do we define this? We can define this just right after this. So after this though, after the post, we can actually have it here, or we can even access this to a separate file. So let's have the async function, and the first one is the handle checkout session completed, which goes on to receive the Stripe checkout session. And here, can I put this side by side? Maybe it's easy for us. No, I think it's gonna not be nice. Okay, so let's continue. The first thing I'm going to do over here, we receive the session. So let's check if the session.mode. So let's say if there is no session.mode, or if the session.mode is not equal to, so let me update this. So if the session.mode is not equal to, so we're going to see the different modes here: payment, setup, subscription. So the mode here is going to be subscription. So if it's not subscription, let's just go on and return. Okay, so we do not want to have anything to do with our database if this was not a subscription payment. Now let's get the Stripe subscription ID. So the Stripe subscription ID, so the Stripe subscription ID is going to be equal to the session.subscription. So this session that we have here, and then we're going to have the Stripe customer ID. So Stripe customer ID, and the Stripe customer ID is going to be equal to the session.customer here. Now we need to fetch the full subscription object from Stripe. So we're going to call this subscription, and this subscription is going to be equal to retrieve subscription Let's see. No, so we need to get it from Stripe. So this is going to be equal to await Stripe, and then we're going to call .subscriptions.retrieve, and then we're going to pass the Stripe subscription ID. And now we have this full subscription object over here. As you can see, the stripe.subscription. We can find out or find our user by the Stripe customer ID. So we're going to have const user is going to be await retrieve customer by the Stripe customer ID, which is this Stripe customer ID that we have over here. And once we get the user, we can just quickly have a check. If there is no user, we want to log to the console and we want to go on to also return. All right, so now we have the subscription. We are not making use of it. We need to then submit the status of the subscription status to the database. So let's await over here. We're going to await the save subscription to database, and we're going to pass in the user ID. So we are having the error. So this data object here, let me quickly clean this up. It's going to have the different fields. So the first field here, or we can pass, let's say the user ID is going to be called to user.id. We have the Stripe subscription ID, and the Stripe subscription ID is going to be equal to subscription.id. Next, we have the Stripe price ID, which is going to be equal to subscription.item. So the first item, because we just have one, .price ID, so .price.id. And then we have the Stripe current period end, which is going to be a new date from the current period end times 1000. Okay, and then we want to have the status, and lastly the status is going to be equal to what? The status is going to be subscription.status as subscription status, or we can say as active. We can just type it out manually ourselves as active or as trailing, all of this. So let me just bring them in here. So as this here, just like this. All right, so why do we have this error here? Subscription.current period end. Okay, now in order for us to fix this, I actually did notice something. Now the first thing I noticed is we actually were wrong to change this to cancelled. Stripe actually uses cancelled like this, which is one confusion. And yeah, so we need to find everywhere in the application where we called it cancelled, and we need to update it to this. So when we search for cancelled here, in the billing model, we need to change this. This needs to be cancelled. So I'm going to paste this in here and also update this. And now we have an error here because of our database is still making use of cancelled. Okay, so here in the schema DB, this needs to be cancelled. Okay, because that's what Stripe uses. So now we have fixed that. Yeah, so now we have some errors here because of functions we are not using. And we also have this error here. Okay, so let's apply the migration because we changed our schema. Let's come over to the package JSON. And in the package JSON, we have the DB generate. So let's run this command real quick. So I'm just going to clear this and I'll say pnpm DB generate like this. And this is going to go on and check our schema. It's seeing that we have a change, and then it updated the tables. And now we have it updated. We need to run DB migrate. So pnpm DB migrate like this, which is going to generate the migration, apply the migration to our database. And since we already have this in our live database in the env, I don't think we need to make any other change. So it cannot connect to remote Vercel through a web socket. All right, no worries. We can just force it. pnpm DB push like this. So let's run the DB push and let's see this. So pulling schema from database, and let's see if it works this time around. So let's give this a moment, and it looks like it was successful and applied changes. Now, if we come over to our Neon database, let's just be sure we should have the status, subscription status. Here, can we see it? Subscription status, is it possible? All right, so maybe there's a way to see it. I'm not quite sure, but subscriptions, I want to see if we can see the values from the subscription status, but maybe when we have a subscription, we'll be able to see it. Okay, so let's continue. The next thing now we're going to do is to fix this error we have over here. And the way we're going to fix this error is, let me just collapse this here. We're going to create a get current period end function, so a helper function. Let's define it here. So const, or let's use the function keyword get current period end. And this is going to take in the subscription, which is going to be stripe.subscription, and it's going to return us a date. Now in here, what we're going to do is simple. First, we're going to have access to the item. So the item is going to be equal to the subscription, the items, the first argument here. And then we're going to have a fallback to the subscription level field just for older versions, because the version that we are currently using in our Stripe is making use of the newer version. So we just need to add some backward compatibility here. And that is going to be const period end, and period end is going to be equal to, then we're going to say this item as type of item, and we're going to have this object current period end. So current underscore period underscore end, optional number like this, dot current period end. And otherwise, so let's come down here and say this. Otherwise, we're going to say subscription as type of subscription, and then at current period end number dot current period like this. And now we can check if current period, or if there is no period end. So if there is no period end, I'm sure this aspect is a little bit confusing, but we're going to go through it in a moment. So if there's no period end, let's throw a new error that current period end could not be found. Otherwise, we want to return a new date where we can say period end times 1000. Okay. And now we have the get current period end. We can then make use of it over here and fix our error. So just like this, and then we pass the subscription. That's what are we doing here? We have this get current period end. This is the way we do it in the newer versions. And then we are going to get the period end just like this. This is not looking pretty, but just this is how the way it works with the current version. And then we return when the period ends like this, and we pass it here. Now we can do the same for subscription, because currently we are having to write out the subscription status ourselves, just like this, casting it manually. But what we can do to make things easier for ourselves is to come over here and let's have the type for subscription status. It's going to be active, trailing, cancelled, past due, or incomplete, or unpaid. And then we can say, or have a function like this that we can say to subscription status, and it's going to take on this subscription the status. And over here, all it's going to do is to say like, what status do we allow? So we can say const allowed. Allowed is going to be of type subscription status array, and this is the status that we allow. And then we can say here if allowed, here like this, if allowed dot include, allow status dot includes the status over here. So this Stripe status as subscription status like this. Then we want to go on and return status as subscription status. Otherwise, we're going to have a console.1 or console.error invalid subscription status, and then we're going to return incomplete just like this. But in our case, the user will just stop here. Okay, so now we can make use of the two subscription status like this, and our code is now actually cleaner. All right, so we have written a bunch of code here just because of an error we faced. And after saving the subscription to a database, the next thing we want to do is to just log to the console that subscription created for user, and then also log in the user ID and save this. All right, so I expect this. Let's see the errors we have here. Why do we have this error? Because, okay, I'm just going to get rid of this. All right, so we have these remaining 3 cases to handle. Let's work on these other cases next. Now we have these other 3 events: the handle subscription updated, the handle subscription deleted, and the handle invoice payment failed. All right, so let's start here. Let's define those other 3 events here. They're going to be simple, straightforward. So we're going to have the async function handle subscription updated, which is going to take in the subscription, and we're just going to await subscription. So we're going to await update subscription in database. We're going to pass in the subscription ID, and then we need to pass in the data. Now the data is going to be the Stripe price ID, and we're going to pass in this is the Stripe price ID, which is subscription items, the first one, and then the price.id, and then the Stripe current period end, and you can see this now comes in handy. And lastly, we have the status, and then we can also make use of our helper function here, which is going to say to subscription status, and then we're going to pass in the status here, and the status here is going to be the subscription dot status like this. And we're just going to have a log here. So console.log subscription updated for the subscription ID. And the next one we're going to have is the handle subscription deleted. And the handle subscription deleted, we're going to await update over here. We're going to say await subscription update subscription in database. We want to pass in the status, which is cancelled. And then we also want to log this over to the console. Now, the last one we have is the handle invoice payment field. Let me double check here. So this for handle invoice payment field. And here, let's have the function, async function handle invoice payment field. And then we're going to get access to the invoice. And we can get the Stripe subscription ID. So the Stripe subscription ID. And the invoice.subscription can be a string ID, or it could actually be a full object, which just goes on to depend on how the invoice was fetched. Now we're always going to try to coerce it to a string, okay? And that's what we are doing here. So the Stripe subscription ID, we're going to check the type of first. So the type of invoice.subscription, invoice.subscription, if it's equal to a string, oops, why do we have this error? So invoice.subscription is equals to a string. Then we want to say invoice.subscription. Otherwise, we want to say invoice.subscription.id like this. So why do we have this error here? We have the error, but it doesn't seem to give me information about why we have the error. So I'm going to just save this, and maybe I'll just reload the window. So just to double check. And after refreshing, I still don't get any hint. TypeScript is loading over here. So let's give it a moment and let's see if the error returns. Now, while we wait, let's check the subscription ID. If there is no subscription.id, in that case, let's just go on and return. So our error came back. No worries, we're going to look into it in a moment. And then we want to await update subscription in database. And we just want to add the status. And the status here is going to be past due. And then we have the log over here. So why do we have this error? Because property subscription doesn't exist on type invoice. All right, this is another API change, just as we faced earlier. So what we're going to say over here is so subscription ID. Let me just have this here. So it now moved over to the parent. It's going to be the invoice.parent, just like this. And then we're going to have .type, and the type, we're going to say if the type is equal to not subscription, yeah, subscription details. If that's the case, we want to say the invoice.parent, but not .id. We're going to say .subscription_details. And then we're going to have access to this subscription, as you can see over here. Otherwise, we're just going to say no. Okay. So that fixes our error. But then, because we make use of null, let's see, string or subscription is not assignable to type string. So this gives us string or stripe.subscription or null or undefined. So let me just, before I cast it as string, so what if I say to string like this? Yeah, so it returns the representation. I think this is okay over here. All right, so I'm going to save this here, just like this, and then we can work with this. And the next thing, I think that's pretty much about it for the different events. So we have the different event handlers here. So all 4 of them. So all 4 of these event handlers. Now, the next thing we're going to double check is for us to disable the body parsing for the webhook route, because Next.js passes request bodies by default, but Stripe needs the raw body for us to verify signatures. So we need to add this to the route file. Maybe I'm just going to get rid of this, maybe somewhere around here, just at the top. Let's make sure that the runtime is equal to Node.js and not Edge. So we're going to export const runtime, and the runtime here is going to be equal to Node.js. We don't want it to be equal to Edge. Okay, so let's have this here, and then we save this. All right, so now we need to test our webhook locally. We have created these different webhooks. It's important for us to test it. And before we test it, I want us to note something, that when we call the Stripe trigger, as we saw some time ago with the Stripe command, Once we call Stripe trigger, Stripe is not going to call it, so Stripe trigger should be somewhere here. Yeah, webhook commands. Stripe trigger, if we check our handlers, we need something like user ID. So you see user, so Stripe subscription ID, session.subscription, session.customer. There's something I'm actually looking for, the user ID. So by customer ID. Now Stripe is going to call this for us with dummy credentials. So we're not actually going to have access to the metadata, so the user ID that we have in our metadata. Okay, so this is just a side note in case you do not get the expectation. So let's just trigger the webhook and see how it goes. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and we can try it next. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's start with the, so we have the session completed, session updated, the subscription deleted, and the payment failed. So we have all these four. Let's test the session completed. So this handle checkout session completed, the handler is going to get triggered. We check the mode, we check the session.subscription, we try to retrieve the customer, and then we retrieve the subscription ID from Stripe. And then based on the customer ID over here, we save the subscription to database and we do the link, and we just have this console over here. All right, so let's try. We're going to say Stripe trigger, and then we're going to say checkout.session.completed like this. So let's send this. Now it's running the feature for the product because it knows the price ID, setting up the feature for the price, running the feature, setting up the checkout session, setting up the feature for the payment page. And you can see the trigger succeeded. I should check the dashboard for the event details. Now, before we go back to the dashboard, let's do the pnpm db studio, which is another command that we have in our package.json. So this command over here. And let's open up the local Drizzle ORM studio here, just so that we can try to inspect our database, or we can do that directly in the NeonDB. So let's give this a moment while it comes up. I'm just gonna say allow. And now it's coming up over here. Let's give this a moment. Actually, it's taking so much time. So let's come directly here and let's refresh this subscription over here. Give this a moment. Now we see no rows, and it's actually expected because, as I said earlier, it's going to get called because it's dummy data. So let's come over here, and if you see somewhere around here, we can actually log it to the console. Well, do we see our console? Nope, we do not see our console here. Okay, but if we come over here, maybe somewhere here, so events.data.objects, I'm just going to copy this, and so that we can log it to the console somewhere here. So console.log the events.data.object, so that we can see what actually is in it. Okay, so let's go through. Let's see why it's not working. I'm going to come back to this handle checkout session completed, and we have the Stripe subscription ID. We have a typo, so Stripe customer ID shouldn't be the reason why, but you know, let's fix this. So Stripe customer ID. So when I call retrieve user by Stripe customer ID from database, I pass across the Stripe customer ID. So that doesn't seem to be the issue actually, since it still passes the right value. And we just need to make sure that the Stripe customer ID, that we have a Stripe customer. All right, so, and we actually do. So if we check our NeonDB, we see this user here. This user has a Stripe customer ID over here. And even if we double check and Stripe our customers, we're going to see that we also have the customer here. And this customer that we have over here also has the Stripe customer ID, which is this customer ID. And this customer ID so matches the last three words, JYL, matches what we have over here. So that isn't the issue. Okay, let's see. So we have the subscription. So let's go back here, and we do not see this. We do not even see the logs. Okay, yeah, and the issue actually makes sense. Okay, the issue makes sense because Stripe cannot actually call our local host. Okay, so it doesn't really have an idea of our local machine. So one way we can do this is we need to open on that terminal. So one terminal for pnpm dev, which is going to run this over here. And then we need on that terminal. And this terminal is where we're going to run the Stripe listing command, just as we did recently, okay? So we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this in here. So we have, it's meant to be Stripe, not Stripe. So we have this here, and then we have this over here. So Stripe listen, and then it's going to forward everything to the route we created. Now I'm just going to double check this just to make sure the value did not change. And let's verify our env if the value is still the same, and yes, it is. All right, so since the value is the same, let's try it out, okay? We're going to try to come over here and let's try this out again. So I'm going to refresh the dashboard, and over here in the dashboard, we're going to hit upgrade to pro. The user comes over to the pricing page. The user hits the checkout, and once the user hits the checkout, it redirects us over to this page. And then in this page, we're going to go through the checkout flow. And then for the month and the year, 27, just like this, code with lari. And then we're going to hit here. So now it's going to do the processing. And once we get redirected over to our success page, so now it's successful. Let's double check here. And you see over here, we now get data, we get information. So we see over here that the post event got called. So here is the log. So finally, we see the log. So you need to keep this running in order to see the log. So the event data object, and the event data object is this. We can see all the information that we need over here. We can see the cancel URL. We can see the currency, the customer ID, which we saw not quite long, and we get all these details and the metadata. So remember the metadata where we had to inject the user ID. This is where we can see the metadata. So anything you add up there, you're going to see it over here. Okay. So if we check the server action, I think that's for the pricing action. So let's find it in the features, the billing action. Over here, so you can see over here, we have this metadata that we set up here with the user ID when we are creating this checkout session. And then when it gets called, we have access to the metadata over here. And the same if we see the subscription data. So somewhere here, we should have the subscription date underscore data object, which I did not see. Yeah, I do not see, but yeah, but that is the general idea. So if you want to add additional data, this is where you're going to add the additional data. Okay, so now that we have this done, you see over here that the subscription is now saved for the user with this user ID. Okay, so we have all these events that we're not handling, things like invoice incoming, things like this, you want to handle it as well. So now if we come over here, back to the dashboard, but if we come over to our neon database, and now if we come over to the subscriptions, we're going to see we now have a subscription with trailing status for this user, which is really, really cool. Okay, so if you come over to the subscription status, just as we are trying, now we can see the different status that we have over here, and we see that the cancelled status also did updates. All right, so now congratulations, you're now able to set up subscriptions, and you can try to trigger the other webhooks yourself manually. So maybe you can open a new tab, and in this new tab you can call Stripe. So here, don't know, maybe, yeah. So you can call Stripe trigger, and then you can say something like customer.invoice. Sorry, yeah, we can try the invoice, but let's say customer.subscription.updated. We try this ourselves. So here you're going to see it's going to get called. We're going to see the logs over here. So you see over here, we see the logs. We see that it gets called. We're not actually logging anything for these events. We're only doing the logs for the first one. That's why we have the logs. Over here, we have an error. Why? Because invalid input syntax for type UID. So I'm just going to leave these two open here. And then I'm going to kill this terminal here or close the terminal over there. And yeah, congratulations, you have set up Stripe subscription. Now we just need to update the different pages of our application, because the application now does not know that the user has a subscription. So the billing page over here, we need to, is still saying like upgrade to pro. The analytics page is still blocking out the user. So we're going to wrap it up by making sure that once a user has an active subscription, the UI in our website updates. We haven't gone on to test the billing over here. So the billing portal, which opens up, and then it's going to redirect the user to that screen where the user can manage their billing as we discussed earlier. So now you see the redirect is going on and the user is being redirected over to the Stripe session, which is a temporal URL. But over here, we can see different subscriptions that, because we have tried this so many times here. So you can get this trial period here. We're just running this in test mode, and code with Lari partners to strive for simplified billing. And if you click here, you can see it takes us back to the billing page. So let's come back here. Before we test that out, let's make sure that our UI is updating. Let's start with the dashboard route. So over here, I'm just going to close all of these that we have opened up here. And let's come over to the app dashboard and the page.tsx. Yes, so let's come over to the page.tsx. So over here on the dashboard page, do we have anything we need to get? Is the analytics, which say unlock. So where do we have it? Yeah, so we just have this upgrade to pro. So rather than have this upgrade to pro, which takes the user to pricing, let's find a way to make sure if the user has an active subscription. So remember, we set up our helpers when we were creating the billing helpers. So over here, require active plan. So let's double check that. If we come over to the features billing in the billing helpers, let's see if we have one. User has active plan or require active plan. So do we have any of that here? No, we don't have that yet. So what's going to happen? Let me get rid of these that we are not making use of here. And I'm going to create a helper function. So export async function. Oops. And I'm going to call this require active plan. This is going to take in the user ID just like this. And now we're going to have subscription. It's going to retrieve subscription from database, and we pass this ID, and we're going to check if it's active, because it's active. And it's active is going to be if the status is active or is trailing, then we're going to know it's active. And in that case, we're going to return the subscription, and we also want to return the boolean. So we want to return this where we have the subscription and also is active. We can now make use of this require active plan right inside of this page, the dashboard page, and every other pages that we want to get by coming right up to the top. And over here, we're going to have this check like const is active and the subscription. So we're going to import our require active plan. In this case, we do not need a subscription. We just need this is active boolean. And here we can just double check this rather than saying upgrade to pro. So we can say something different over here. So rather than say upgrade to pro, for the user to visit the analytics page here, and we can just display something different. So if it's active, we're going to say manage billing. No, we want to say if it's active, let's make the href customizable. So let's say the href is active. You go to /dashboard/billing. Otherwise, you go to /pricing. But in this case, since it's the analytics, let's make it go over to the analytics page. And we're also going to say here if it's active, say analytics, and just all of this. So let's see what it's saying here. If it's active, we're going to say analytics. Otherwise, we're going to say analytics pro feature. And then this text, if it's active, we're going to say you have access to detailed metrics. Otherwise, we're going to say this. And lastly, for this, the URL also update. Now, if we save this, we have an active subscription. We should no longer see this upgrade to pro text that we are seeing over here. Let's just give this a refresh. Let's give this a reload. Let's see our UI update, and this is our UI update. Now, we still see upgrade to pro. Let's update the text. We no longer, we just want to say things, something like view analytics, which is what we see over here. Now, the next page we are going to be working on is the analytics page. If we come over here to view analytics, you can see we are still getting this because this page hasn't been updated to work with the analytics. So we're also going to do the same thing. I'm going to close all that we have opened here and then come over to the analytics page. Over here in the analytics page.tsx, currently we use this hard-coded boolean, this analytics unlocked. We're going to get rid of this. Now we're going to come right inside of the page component file, which is this analytics page. We want to be able to get the data. So we're going to await session. We have not marked this as an asynchronous function. So let's say export default async function. And we're going to bring all of these in. So what are we doing here? Let's also bring in redirect. We bring in the session. And then if there is no session user, we redirect to login. And if we do, we display this, we get this require active plan. And then we get this is active boolean. And what we're going to do with the boolean over here is over here where we have this hard-coded, we are going to change it and say if it's not active, we want to show that blurry UI. Otherwise, if it is active, we're not going to display anything. Okay, so that's all we're going to do. And then the user, because this is absolute z index 20 and it kind of covers the entire screen, but over here that's not the actual case. So over here the user would not have that blurry screen, and then once they save this, they can see or have access to the entire UI, which is this. Cool. So this is actually beautiful that we're able to see this because we have a subscription. Now the last thing we are gonna do is the billing page. I think this billing, yeah. So we also need to do the same thing for the billing page, because now the billing is still saying showing the current plan as well as the upgrades to Pro. Now let's also go on and make sure that the billing page is showing the correct data. So over here where we have the billing, we have the page.tsx. Let's start by retrieving the subscription from database. So I'm going to get rid of this and we're going to start with the session. So const session is going to be equal to await auth. We need to bring in auth from our lib auth here. And then let's mark this as an async function. Let's use the await keyword. Let's mark this as async here. And then we can check if there is no session.user like this. We want to redirect the user over to login, and redirect can come in from next navigation. And then at this point, we know we have an active user. So we can then fetch the subscription. So let's say const retrieve or require active plan. Let's double check what this does. So this fetches the subscription from database, and also it checks if it's active, and then it returns the subscription and also is active. We're going to make use of it here, have this is active, and also let's bring in the subscription. And now we can check if we want to only show the portal card. So let's save this. And this is the portal card where it says open billing portal. So it's just below this billing card that we have over here. Let's log that. I'm going to cut this. So this is the card, Control X. And then I'm going to say is active. If that is true, then I want to display this card. Now we're going to see the card because it's currently active. So let's save this, Control S. And if we come back here, we still see this card. But if I come over here and say it's not active, then I'm not going to see the card anymore. Okay, so this is what a normal user is going to see that is not subscribed yet. And now for the billing card, we're going to pass some props to this billing card, which is the subscription. And the subscription is going to be equal to subscription. Otherwise, we're going to pass null, not undefined. And then let's do the remaining work inside this billing card. So this billing card is this card that we have over here. Let's start with defining the interface. So we're going to say interface billing card props is going to be equal to subscription, which is going to be of type subscription or null. Subscription can come in from our DB schema, and here we can destructure subscription. And we also need like the status config, where we can have an object with the different labels like active, trailing, past due. So let's also do that with some icons that would come in from Lucid React. So we're going to say status config. And this is going to be equal to active. We're going to have the label, the variant, as well as the icon. And we're going to have the same for trailing. We're going to have the same for past due and for cancelled. And for cancelled, let's continue. Let's have the variant. And the variant here is going to be variant. And the variant here is going to be, let's say, outline as const. And then we have the icon, which is going to be alert circle. We have the next one for incomplete, the label, the variant, and the icon. and then we have for unpaid like this. Now let's bring in all of these from Lucid React. So let's bring in the different imports that we need. Let's also bring in clock from Lucid React. All right, so all of these are making use of alert. So we have active, we have trailing, past due, cancelled, incomplete, and then we have unpaid. Now inside this card, let's have the is active. So here, let's quickly double check. Give me a second. Let's double check this is active boolean. I just want to double check how we get it. So we do this. It doesn't make sense for us to repeat this. So what we're going to do, we're also going to pass is active as a prop over to this card. So here, let's have is active, and is active is going to be equal to is active. And that means we can come right inside the billing card. And for the props, let's also have is active, which is going to be of type boolean. And that means we can destructure is active right from here. Now we have access to is active, and we also have access to the status. So this status is going to be equal to subscription, which we are getting in as prop here. So this object. And then we say we are mapping it to the subscription config. So this config we have here. If the status is, let's say, active, then we are returning this object over here. So that's what we are doing. So we're going to have access to the active object, otherwise no. So status here is going to be this object that has the label, the variant, as well as the icon. For the icon, let's have the status icon. So status icon is going to be equal to this status.icon, because this is going to be JSX. That's why we have it here as capital letter, uppercase. And here we can display the status just after here. So we have the current plan. If it's active, we do not want to display the free plan. If it's active, we want to display the pro plan, because that's the plan that we have in our application. So I'll cut this, and then I would say if it's active, I want to display, let's say pro plan. Otherwise, I want to display the text that we had previously, which is this text over here. So it needs to be wrapped in string, just like this. So this is the text that we're going to display. And after that, we also want to display the status badge. And the status badge, we have the card header, and then let's try to have a div that is going to have the title as well as the description. So I'll cut this, and in here we display this div, which is then going to display the title and the description. And here we have the current plan, and we have this. Actually, I'm going to have another div which is wrapping this div over here, because I want it to also display the status. Okay, so I'll cut this, so Ctrl X, and have another div in here, and I'll paste this in here. So just after this first div, let's have this status check. We're going to set the status, and if the status over here, so if you hover on this and it's able to get a match, so if the status is true, we want to display the badge component that would come in from components UI badge, and I'll close this up here. And what I'm going to display in this badge, let's give it first, let me style this real quick. I'm going to give this a class name of flex item center justify between, and then this badge, I'm going to give it a variant of status.variant, just like this. And then I would also display the label here. Okay, so why do we have this error? Because variant R-I-E-N-T, so oops, A-N-T, so there's a typo here, just like this, and the error is gone. So I also want to give this some class names. So let me give this class name of flex items center, and I also want to give it a gap of 1 like this. And rather than only have the label, I also want to display the status icon. Remember, we have the status icon. So here I'm going to have the status icon. If it is true, then let's display the status icon. I'll give it a height of 3 and a width of 3, just like this. Now let's see how our UI is currently doing. If we come over here, we display the pro plan, and we see this trial that shows over here, because that's the period we are on. We are currently in the trial period, the trailing period, sorry. And if we continue, let's come into the card content. And here in the card content, we want to display the status and all of this. Now, this is going to be so long. So I'm just going to copy over the new content that we have here, so that we can save some time off from typing, and replace the content here. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can oops, pause you can pause and just copy so that we are on the same page over here. I'm sorry if it's too tiny. So what do we have here? We're displaying the past due warning. And let me also like fix this over here. So we're displaying the past due warning. If the subscription status is past due, we want to display this warning that says, hey, your last payment failed. Please update your payment method to keep access. And then we have this renewal, which also like display the trial end date. And we want to display the date over here. So it shows the renewal because we have the Stripe current end period. That's when the user is on the trailing state. And then we have the free. If the user is not subscribed, then we give the user the option to update. We give the user the option to update to pro. So I would save this. Hope you're able to like get all the content and zoom back in here. Now, if we come over to the UI, we are going to see the trial period ends 10th of May, which is what we see. And then we can give the user, come over to the billing portal and give the user the option to manage their billing. So let the billing portal open up here. Just as we saw earlier, we can test out the functionalities here. And here is where the user will manage. So this is our card. We can go on to cancel the subscription. So let's cancel the subscription. Yes, I want to cancel the subscription, $12 per month. The subscription gets canceled. And if you come over here, you see that the webhook got fired over here. Invalid syntax for UUID, error processing event, query failed, update subscription. All right, let's investigate this error that we are having over here. Error processing event, failed query, update subscription. So we're trying to update the subscription, which is this update subscription model in database. And if we come over here, so let's come over to this line. So can we click about line 44? Let's investigate further, which is this. So handle subscription updated. Let's come here. And then we're calling update subscription in database. So over here, we have the subscription and then we have update subscription in database. Okay, so I'm going to come right in here. And let's see what we are doing here. We are waiting db.update. We have the subscriptions. And then we set the data. We update at. And then where subscriptions dot. So where the subscriptions? Oh, okay. So this subscriptions table. We are updating subscriptions.id. No, it shouldn't be subscriptions.id. It should be subscriptions.stripe subscription ID. So that's where we are having the error from. And then we should also pass over here where do we have it? The subscription ID, which is also like the Stripe subscription ID. All right, so let's update this to be Stripe subscription ID so we don't have naming errors here. And then I'm going to save this. So now it has compiled. And if we come over to the routes, so we are passing the subscription ID over here, which is this subscription ID. And if we take a look at handle subscription updated, this is taking the event data as the subscription ID. Okay. So I think we have solved it, but let's verify if everything is okay. I'm going to say no thanks here. And then let's Stripe close this up. We have these 3 subscriptions. I'm just going to come back here so that we try it again. So over here, I'm going to open up the billing portal once more and wait for the Stripe session to load. And now that we have it loaded up here, I'm going to try to cancel this subscription again. So I'll say cancel subscription. Let's give this a moment. Now it's successful. And let's take a look here. So we see this is the error from previous. And now we see subscription updated for this sub. So we have actually fixed the error that we were having earlier. So that's cool. And that means we do not have any issues here again. We still see our current subscriptions. No worries. This is the free trial. This is going to cancel on 10th of May. And then this is the free trial again. So let's also cancel this subscription that we have over here. So we're going to cancel this subscription and then it's going to be canceled. Okay. So now Stripe is going to call other functions for us. So if we come over here, once the subscription gets canceled, like subscription deleted, then we can go on to call handle subscription deleted. and then handle subscription deleted is going to update subscription in database, this time around with the status of cancelled. Okay, so that's everything done. Let's have a recap of what we have been able to achieve, and then we can wrap up this this session. All right, so let's go through the final build of everything we have been able to achieve. In terms of the Stripe setup here, we have been able to achieve like setting up a billing page. So if you come over here, I think we currently have a subscription. That's where we see we are currently on the trial period that ends of this time. But if we come over to the, I think that's the pricing page. So the pricing page, we have been able to set up the different products over in our Stripe dashboard. So over here, we set up 2 products here. So we have so these are the subscription that we're actually seeing over here. But if we come further down, we should see like the pro plan here that was created. And over here, we have the default, which is the $12 per month. We have also seen how to set up the yearly plan. And then we've also seen how we can go on to set up the Stripe webhook. And we created this route over here where we set up different handlers based off the event type. So if it's the checkout session completed, or the subscription updated, subscription deleted, or payment failed. We also saw how to, listen to webhook, how we can also go on and trigger webhook on our own. And basically, this is a good base. If you're building out your own project, you'd see how to create a Stripe customer. If you come over to the customer, you can see the customer here that's been created. And this customer here, you can get all the details like when the trial period ends, stuff like this. You can go on to see the payment succeeded. You can see their entire payment history here. I see all these from previous because this is like what I use for tutorials. So that's it. I truly appreciate your time. Hopefully you're able to learn, and don't forget to give the channel a thumbs up. It usually goes a long way. So till I see you on the next build. Bye bye.